right. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Online Bible Institute Network podcast. I'm Douglas Laws. I kind of get to MC and host this podcast because I push buttons. With me are my father, Pastor Steve Laws, the founder of the Online Bible Institute Network. And also with me is Pastor Brain. He's like next to me on the screen that I can see. And Pastor Brain is at the live OBI Network studio in Cameroon. You can tell by the sweet digs and the fake plant there in the corner. And we're very excited that we've upgraded his setup. And he looks fantastic. Glad we're all here. Last week we had some internet connection issues, so we didn't get to have you on. So glad we're all here. The gang is back together. How was you guys this week? Before we jump into our talk today, I want to hear what's going on, what we've gone over, all that good stuff.
Well, I'll start. Busy week, and we're actually Brain and I have been busy. We're working on sort of redoing the course structure on some of the courses, and it's going to be great when it's done. It's a lot of work. So we've been working through that long distance, and I'm pretty excited about that. That's been a good thing. And, been other than that, just kind of, we got a lot of projects going on around here and around the church and around the network and some other little things I'm trying to get started. So I get a little idea for church encouragement that I'm trying to get going. So lots of little, things happening, but I like that. It keeps me busy.
Sure.
How about you, Brain?
Yeah, it's been great. It's been a great week. Busy. Yeah. We're having more students now on the OBI site with greater engagement and all of that. So before now, I used to do like 2 hours a day, just responding to the summaries and all that. But I realized that for the better part of this week, I needed to double that up to 4 hours. So every morning I'll wake up and try to catch up. I've really been doing catch up on that because the students are really, they're engaging. That's something that I'm happy about. It's a good problem to have when you have that. Yeah, until yesterday, I had a whole new setup. I mean, all the stress was taken away and I'm good. I'm good. I should have been stressed out by now if I continued as I was going. But with what I have now, I mean, all that took a different turn yesterday. And it's good. You can see the evidence on your screen as you look at me.
Yeah.
I'm smiling from molar to molar.
He was sending me pictures, and I was like, "Man, you almost look like me now with the setup." So
that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, it's been a great week.
Yeah, good. How I love how God puts things together, and that now, the great distances that we have are nothing, right? I mean, Douglas is probably 7 miles from me right now, but Brain's got to be, you're thousands of miles away, and who would know, right? You look like you're sitting in the next room.
Exactly. Hey, he's live from the OBI Network studio. Okay,
Yeah,
we don't need to let everybody know he's, thousands of miles away.
No,
I think they knew that already. Anyway,
it's a worldwide studio. It's fascinating. This thing
exactly. It's a global studio.
Listen, as we add more networks on little campuses and we get them to where we can relate, these little podcasts can have. It's going to be. I get so excited about what this could be that it's hard to wait. But it is. I'm happy with what it is too. But
this is fantastic. I enjoy these talks, and it always goes really well. And these podcasts started with me learning how to preach from my father. And what we would do is we'd go over our messages we do at Keys Vineyard on the weekends. And I got to do it a couple weeks ago, but Dad, you're up again this week, and we are in Luke chapter 12. And last week was a really good talk. You went over the Lord's Prayer, and we went through that. And, why don't you kind of give us a brief recap of last weekend and then how that moves into this week where we're looking at Luke chapter 12.
Yeah, well, the Lord's Prayer, I like the idea of how it's a poem. Like he wrote this poem and gave it to his disciples. To me, that just really personalizes it. And I think maybe for a lot of people, they learned the Lord's Prayer and they thought you just said it and that was it. And I think that's really, it lost its deeper meaning, which was a guide to prayer. And that I think what Luke is really good at doing is encouraging us to know Jesus, know his heart more, right? To connect with him in deeper ways so that we know his heart more, which is why, we've already talked about the importance of reading the word, and he demonstrated how important the Bible was to him. And we talked about forgiveness and how that's really foundational. Forgiveness is, for receiving and extending forgiveness, and how that's crucial to the heart of the Lord. And then we looked at this idea of prayer, and if you actually start to look at the Gospels, Jesus is always praying. I mean, he's just constantly going off to pray, and as a model for us. And then today we're going to move into Luke, or this weekend we're going to move into Luke 12, and we're talking about being generous, and that God is a giver, and so he expects that out of us as well. It should be our nature and our character to be generous, and I like to approach it. Money causes people anxiety. And it causes anxiety for a lot of people if they have money or if they don't have money. It's just different. It's just different
Right,
anxieties.
right, yeah.
And it can be a very difficult subject to talk about in the ministry, because I think I don't like being, I think sometimes it's not talked about appropriately, and that the motivation behind the talking about it and nobody's got perfect motive, but it can be a little skewed. So I always like to come at it with the idea of generosity and what that means, and then I always feel like I need to give some practical teaching on handling money, at least in our culture. Like it probably doesn't extend, all over the world, but I think if I just come on and tell people, well, you're a believer and you need to give this much money, and then and don't really go into the behind part of it, and then maybe some practical help on how to do it, that people can't, and then they just feel guilty, and it becomes a whole nother problem that it shouldn't be. So my discussion will be on start with, and in Luke 12 it's all about this guy who he's got so much success happening that he tears down his barns and build bigger ones. And then he says, and then I'll have room for all of my stuff. And everything in in that passage is my, I. And at the end, the Lord just calls him a fool and says, it's, you kind of got that wrong, because it's not, watch what happens at the end of the day. And then he shifts from that story and goes to his disciples who, in following him, they're not sitting there with barns full of stuff. And he basically says, look, your focus is wrong. Don't worry. That's not what you need to worry about. Basically, it's seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and he takes care of everything else. And so that you're not anxious, whether you have too much or whether you don't have enough. It's all about trusting God. And I think the big switch has to be from having the idea of owning things to the idea of stewarding things. Like it's all belongs to God, and we just want to be good stewards. But we take on the idea of, well, I own this, my, I, and we need to get, I'm the steward of these things. All these things belong to God, and will ultimately go back to God, because I don't know anybody that takes it with them, right? It's like it all stays here. So
People have tried for a long time.
It's all going to be here. So who really owns it?
Right.
And then when you kind of can rest in that, you can sort of be less anxious. And there's something about generosity. When we see, it's too many people get this money thing and try and make it a law thing, and that puts people under the law. When I think generosity is a freedom thing, and that's all he always wants us to be free. I will say this to you guys. I probably wouldn't say it to anybody else, but giving is one
On
of
a
those
public podcast, he'll say it.
I know, but you know how many people are listening. Giving is one of those
It's
areas.
a few. Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
zero.
Giving is
now.
one of those areas where oftentimes the church, it's like the only thing they want to put people back under the law in. Like, no, we don't believe in the law except for this one. You got to
Wow.
give 10%. And I'm like, well, why? When I think if we can introduce them to the freedom of generosity, then it knows no bounds. Then it's whatever. It's, Lord, it's all yours. You tell me what to do, and I'll do it. And then the idea of a tithe, which is I think important, but I think it's more of a, it's like, you know, that should be sort of the starting point, and then from there we can grow. But in our culture, where I go with this next, and practically is, in our culture, most people live way beyond what they make. So I start talking about if what you make is let's call that 100% of your income, right?
That's yes.
That's what you make. But because of, in our culture, credit and the availability of credit, many people live at like 120% of what they make. So they're stressed out. They're living way beyond their means because of credit, and then credit debt that's the enemy, like personified, putting people in bondage. Once again, the enemy always looks for ways to get people in bondage, and he does it financially. Puts them into this debt they can't get out of, and then they have a heart for the Lord, but they're living at 120% already. And then if I come in and say, okay, and you need to be given 10%, they're like, well, where does that come from? So you know, they have to stop doing like eating or something, and it's like, no, okay. So what I always come in and say, deal first, you got to work your way out of debt. Sure. And so if you have 120%, let's get 10% out of debt. Let's just get it. So now you'll be down to 110%. And then you're going to keep working on that other 10%. But while you do that, let's get 10% in savings. Let's start working towards having savings. And then when you can get yourself down back to 100 because you get out of debt, then you have money to give. And the giving, I always say that's the most important, but you have to be set up to give it, or you can't do it with a generous heart, because you're stressed, or you're guilted into it, or it feels manipulated. And that's just not the heart that we're looking for. We want hearts that are genuinely happy to be able to give to God. So you have to get back. So I have to try, in our culture, I have to convince people to go from living at 120%, where they're basically not saving and not giving, and I have to convince them to get down to living on 80%, really 75% of what they make, so that they're not living on the edge and they have some freedom. So that takes a lot of convincing, because listen, you have to quit living beyond your means. You have to figure out what that looks like, and that's where life begins to happen, and you can relax. And we spend a lot of money on things we don't really need, because we're so spontaneous in our culture that we keep buying stuff that we don't have money for, and there's an immediate hit on that. But then there's a debt, so that you're often, the way it's set up, that we're paying on things for way longer than we actually have them or use them. Like there's things that we'll have and then they won't keep working, and yet we're still paying on them. And so it's sort of working all these ideas together that I think is critical, so that people can be generous. And there's nothing better. There's nothing better than giving. I mean, there's not. Everybody experiences that, I think, a little, like at Christmas. There's a joy of giving. You look forward to it, right?
Yeah.
But right. I think God wants us for that, our lives, to be like generous. Like, okay, what does it look like? But there's definitely some transitions that need to happen. And a lot of people get funny when you start talking. They're like, preacher, you can talk about anything but money. Don't talk about my money. I'm leaving.
And that's when it gets back to stewardship too, right? But it's amazing what credit cards have done to like people in my generation. It's only been recently where I've started to earn more than I spent. Like what we have that talk. You must spend less. And it's hard because, we're just inundated with advertisements day in and day. We see it everywhere. And, oh, this might make me happy. And we click it and we order it. Or, well, I want to do this because I want it. Or, and yeah, we kind of have to get out of that constant barragement of advertisements and that overspending. Because we're like, well, if I just manage the monthly payments or whatever, I can handle it. And I watch a podcast. It's a guy who's a little younger than me, but he goes over people's finances, and they're like, people a little bit younger than us, and just the messes people get themselves into from overspending. And then, there was this one couple that was on that podcast. They thought they were 30 grand in debt, and that was okay. They were actually $87,000 in debt. They were both only 26 years old, and it was mostly consumer debt. Just, well, I deserve to be happy.
Yeah.
And we hear that things make us happy, and it's not true. So, we have to get settled in stewarding well, living within our means. It's huge. And it's been so life-giving just being on a budget. And, we put this amount away, stop spending everything you can. You don't have to spend every dollar you make, because I think people get in that trap too. It's like, oh, I've got this much money I can spend. Try to spend less than you earn. and sounds so obvious, but yet so hard to do.
And that idea of a monthly payment is straight from the pit. I think it's one of the things that have taken most people down, because it doesn't matter what it costs a month. It matters what it costs.
Because, the monthly payment's going to extend it. Like I see these people with, say a credit card balance of, let's call it $5,000, right? And if that has a 30% interest, which is your average interest rate, you're going to be paying that minimum monthly payment for like 20 years.
Yeah, you never get ahead of it at the monthly payment, and they don't want you to.
No,
they want you to.
They just want a guaranteed monthly payment every month. And just
how does that? So in Cameroon, is this even an issue? Do people buy things on credit there?
Yeah, we don't really buy things on credit the way you do. You can have a relationship with someone in the shop and you take on credit. But what most of them would do is you would leave that thing with them. Whatever you're taking on credit, you will leave it with them. And when you're done paying off for whatever you were buying, you can get it. Because it's not like in your culture where we have checks and balances here and there, and there are securities on money. We don't have that. But what we do have here is, there are these microfinance institutions. You have banks and all of that. They give out loans. Sometimes you take that, and sometimes you really feel that you have to take it, and you go get it. And truth is, they really do not want you to meet up with the timeline. The point is they want to make as much interest from you as they can. And they get that. So they can give you a few millions and say pay off in 5 years. And we know, those of us that go to take from the bank, we know that we cannot pay up in 5 years. we every time you try to catch up on it. It's really interesting, because talking about stewardship, that's something that hits the core of Christianity, because we're stewards of our lives. I mean, if God owns us, he owns everything about us. And generosity becomes a big part of it, because we now accept that what we have, what we are, this is a gift from God. And if there are others that are in need, we should be able to extend a hand to help them. But I was really happy yesterday when I brought this machine up and set the whole thing. My wife was really excited. So I told her, well, I'll not do a thing on these computers until you pray for it. So come pray, thank God about it, and dedicate it to God, and let's see how we use it. So she came, and in her prayer, she mentioned something that really struck me. I mean, I didn't think about that. She came up with that in her prayer. She was like, God, help us that as we've received of the generosity of Pastor Steve and the family and the church, help us that as a family, we would someday, we will be able to get to this position where others are happy and others are find life easy because of us. But that really it struck a chord deep in my heart because sometimes, and this is a thing in our context, we're happy receiving because we are under the illusion that we don't have. Yeah, when you look at it on physical terms, that's the reality. We don't have as much as some other parts of the world, but we are better than others. And so when you think about that prayer really meant a lot to me because yeah, we should be able to pass on the same grace that we've received, and it makes a lot of sense that way. You mentioned something here. You said giving transforms you into a generous person. I was trying to to think about that because generosity begins with giving, right? You give, and before you know it, you have become so generous. You don't only give material things, you literally give your heart out to people. If you're able to give your time to someone, give whatever you can, and extend the hand of grace and forgiveness, like we've been talking about. That's all part of generosity. We allow people into our space, and we do not really keep people away because we want to embrace them and see that we make their lives better. And it's wonderful.
Yeah. It's good. You have what you were describing is what we would call layaway. That used to be a big deal here, but it now
And
with
then the
credit
credit cards replaced it. Yeah.
because layaway was helpful because you still had to pay. You owned it when you left with it. You'd paid for it. See, with credit cards, you take it and you haven't paid for it. You're promising to pay for it, but then it's a mess.
It's
And
like
it's got
layaway without the waiting and more
and
interest.
there's something waiting for believers in a culture like ours. I'm sure that's true everywhere. Waiting is difficult,
That's
but
right.
it's also very biblical. There's you have to wait, and because that's goes back to the two trees and the one tree, the tree of life. There's some waiting that goes on at that tree, and it's the other tree there's no waiting at, and that's the one that always gets us in trouble. And that just the enemy finds a way to work that into everything,
That's right.
and so it's just another one of those big areas that can be very difficult. But I do know for a fact that when people grab a hold of generosity, it's one of the biggest life changers there is. Because
That's
there's a
right.
freedom that comes from generosity that doesn't come anywhere else. It's like, okay, it's all God's. And it God is so cool. Like I think you probably have to be willing to give up, whatever. But at the same time, he doesn't generally call you on that. You make sure you have what it's like, okay. I mean, I like, don't get me wrong, but I like nice things, but I don't have to have like, you know, I drive a very moderate car.
My car is very, very moderate.
Yeah,
So,
because it gets me from here to there. It doesn't need to
That's
be
right.
like the fanciest, best car. I don't need that, right? I have comparatively, I have a pretty small house compared to, my area and most people, but I'm very happy and it's all I need, right? So,
That's right.
you can, if you have to have the biggest and the greatest and the latest, you end up very stressed because you're always living on the edge of everything and there's just
That's
no
right.
life there. Yeah.
That's right.
So
And
anyway,
I think that part of generosity is depriving yourself for the sake of others, you know, so that others can have. uh, they could measure up with you or not, but you deprive yourself because you have and you can have, but you give up the ability to have so that others can get it. I
yeah,
think that's a height of generosity.
yeah. And it's a both and. I said this last week. People get stuck in either or. It's either this or that. No, it's kind of both and. It's like you need to be generous, and at the same time, God wants you to be. I think God's happy that you got just as long as you know it's His.
That's right.
And I think the more faithful you are to it, the more stuff He has you steward. Oh, okay.
That's
Well, you're
right.
pretty good with that. Steward this for me.
Sure.
Okay, yeah. And then you go from there.
That's
Well,
right.
anyway, yeah, that's good stuff. I'm gonna next week. I know you haven't asked, but I'm telling you anyway. We'll be in Luke chapter 15. We'll go to the next chapter, and it's I'm going to talk about celebrating. It's the parable of the lost things. But in each one, the common thing is a party, and we're going to talk about why.
That's great. You know, I was doing an NT Wright lesson, and you know, he was talking about Easter and what it means, and you know, we're approaching that in a few weeks, and he was like, Easter's something we really need to celebrate more as a church. You know, it should be like a party, that the way we try to subtract during Lent, we should add for, you know, the Easter time up until Pentecost. So I'm looking forward to that talk next week. Good one today. Always good to talk about finances, you know. And I love the point you make where churches want to go back to the law when it comes about money, and that, you know, what a point to hit home for us in ministry, and something is to not do. So yeah, really, really good stuff. And very excited about this podcast and its future. Thank you all so much. There are people watching this, Dad, and they do every week. And so we're very thankful for you all. You're a big part. You know, keep doing the Bible Institute courses that you're doing. You make a big difference. You know, it's impactful when we study and when we learn about the Bible. And yeah, be checking it out. Lots of cool stuff coming up. Anything else we need to add before we say goodbye?
No, I don't think so. I think we're good.
Yeah, well, just to encourage the branches we have, they're doing a great. I was on phone with I think all of them in the course of this week. So one at a time, though, not together, and they all testify that the institutes are doing well. They're taking up students. I mean, we've had, I think, the one that I forwarded today, that should have been the fourth student, I mean, distributed to all these branches. And they somehow found the OBI site and they were forwarded. And that's how we grow these branches. And they're doing well. And they respond kind of on point as well. They don't have these delays in responses. When I send an email, send a WhatsApp message, they get it, and that encourages me. It should encourage us all that we're expanding, and great things are happening across the globe. Yeah.
It's good stuff. Yeah, good. Thank you.
Yeah, doing a fantastic job with that, Pastor Brain. And with all that being said, let's sign off of our podcast. Woo! That's a church reference there. Again, thank you all. We will see you next week.